Hi, everybody on here. I'm coming to you with this month's video, and it's exciting. I'm wrapping up being on the road as I put this out. The cornfields are a little walk I took not too long ago in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and so it was kind of fun to be walking among the really tall corn stalks that are there, enjoying that. But I'm also looking forward to being home in Maine, and that's always got a piece of my heart in it, and looking forward to returning and seeing how things are going to unfold over the next year. Definitely going back, facing some challenges right off the bat, but you know it's always come back to this trust and this faith and this conversation. And conversation's important, and it's one of the things I'm going to be talking about today, for this month's video, and that is why open discourse is so important. And this open communication, I mean, we can have it with people, we can have it with ourselves, we can have it with God, we can have it in a lot of different ways. And I'm frequently in conversation, like with my Magi team and with God. And in doing that, I'm not always going to hear the things that I want to hear. But if I'm willing to listen and really take in the value of things, if I'm willing to really take in what needs to be said, then that's a huge thing. That's important. And that's where a lot of our growth happens. That's where a lot of things can really open up for us. So I want to get started on this. I'm going to try to keep it at a reasonable length. And by the way, the 2024 book is out. I'm sorry I don't have a copy of it yet to show you. That's 2023, which you can't even really see. But if you want to check out more of that, head over to my website, compassioncodes.com, and go to the goods tab. You'll see the code journey on there, and that will get you direct links to where you can pick up your copy for that. And by the way, the ebook version of 2023 is free. So if you want to check it out and you want to kind of see what the work is about more, before purchasing 2024, you can do that as well. So that's pretty exciting to have that open and available right now. Something I like to do as a gift for people. Now, talking about this discourse, open discourse, and what is that about? Well, first we want to understand from a code perspective, what is open discourse? From a code perspective, open discourse is about seeing how different things are interacting, seeing how past choices create the present that open up for more possibilities in the future, and understanding that interwovenness in a way that is objective, and bringing in the different spiritual thoughts, perspectives, esoteric concepts that can play into helping us see a variety of different perspectives in a particular situation or issue or discussion of things. It is about consciously choosing to not be in battle with other people, or to constantly feel like we got to look over our shoulder and be worrying about them and what they're up to and what they're doing, but being able to look at things from this objective perspective, from being able to embrace what they have to offer instead of rejecting what they have to offer. And this is a huge thing, because a lot of times people will do things that trigger us. They will do things that set us off, that just, it's like, oh, I can't handle it when they do this, or I can't handle it when they do that. And when we're in that perspective, we're actually in more of a battle mode, or an opposition mode, than we are in an objective space. And we're in a space of resisting and rejecting what they have to offer, as opposed to embracing what might be something valuable that they have to offer, or seeing things from, again, another perspective. So it really helps us to step out of just our own mindset on something. We all have our views and our opinions, and that's not going to stop. We all have our ideas of how things should be and how they should play out. But through open discourse, we can actually expand that perception and that thinking, and we can come to realize that if we're thinking in a narrow way, that open discourse can help us to consider things that maybe we aren't considering. It may help us to account for factors that we just don't want to look at in things. So when we start to do this, open discourse helps us to break down our resistance to opposition. And this is going to be really, really important, especially as we go into 2024. So if we can start to practice this now, that's going to be a good thing. As we go into 2024, we continue to see this attempt to divide people in our world. And I see so many people that are divided. And particularly one of the things I see is the mother-daughter energy being so divided. So our maternal energy is actually being very split right now. And that is so sad to see. And this plays into so many other things that are happening in our world. And and while this video isn't a world events video by any means, but we do want to consider that we don't want to lose this energy. And how powerful is that mother-daughter energy? Is that maternal energy in the world that it's trying to be there are those who want to divide and separate it and to create this battle that's going on. And it's not just one person. I see it in my life. I see it in multiple people. I see it between soul sisters. I see it, between mother figures and daughter figures. I see it, very strongly in those where the mothers are maybe in um, their late 50s, their early 60s, and the daughters are maybe in their 20s, maybe mid 20s or later 20s or early 30s. And that age range seems to be the most impacted by this. But this discussion's about everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're female or male or whatever in that sense. It's just an observation that I've made. And it's breaking down that ability to communicate. And that's why I bring it up, because open discourse is a call to communicate. And that is so important in our world today. And it's so hard because in so many of these situations that I see breaking down, one side's trying to communicate and the other side wasn't, or they just hit these walls that are so intense and so hard. And it's so challenging. So when we start to look at this, and when we can get into open discourse, we will start to see the resistance come down, the resistance to what the opposition, the opposing view is. And we can learn to do that without giving in to the opposition or agreeing with it. So open discourse doesn't mean that we have to come to agreement on things. It's simply that opportunity to present two different perspectives and two different sides on things, and to open us up to consider the other perspective, not just shut it out and say, hey, you're wrong and I'm right and this and that, but to really stop and consider their perspective. And I think that sometimes we forget in our world that, as we get older, we forget sometimes what it's like to be younger. And I, it's important for us to go back and remember and think to ourselves, if I was back in my 25-year-old self, how would I receive what I'm trying to say now? Um, and yes, there's always different factors and different circumstances and different pieces and components like that. But again, the key is to come in and to just have the open discussion without the anger, without the triggers, without just truly genuinely listening to what the other person has to say. Because when we overcome something on our spiritual path, we oftentimes don't stop and keep giving consideration to people who maybe haven't overcome that same challenge. And so we get this frustration that builds up, and we get this aspect of just blocks and obstacles, and we shut out hearing what the other person has to say. We start to devalue things that they are experiencing. And while we develop and we learn and we go, okay, I've learned that maybe material things are not really important in my life. But then on the other hand, we sometimes forget that when you're 25 years old, material things are really important in your life. And the key is, can we jump in and look at it from that perspective? Again, where was our past self with some of these things? And how do we open that up in there? So again, it's a memory. That open discourse we don't have to agree with what everybody says or what somebody else says, but we do want to genuinely listen to what they have, because what they share for us, even if it's not of value to us, is of importance, is of a big issue for them, perhaps. And when we recognize that, that's when we start to meet somebody where they're at on their path, or to be open to understanding the path that they're on at the time. And so we may be on a totally different path, and that's okay, because a lot of times we are in different points of the path. That doesn't make us more evolved than somebody else because we face certain challenges. I mean, everybody's faced some challenges, and everybody's still working on some challenges and things in life. And it doesn't matter how far you go and how much you know, you're always going to be working on things as long as you're in this third dimensional energy here. You're always going to be refining and developing, and time shift and change. And, there's shifts and changes that happen. There's no doubt that when I become 80 or 90 years old, I'm not going to be exactly the same as I am now. There may be some basic core principles there, but, there will be probably some shifts and changes and some different perspectives on things, because as we go through life, we have different perspectives on things. And that's really where this open discourse comes in and becomes valuable. And what this open discourse is a process of learning and understanding different viewpoints. That's what it's really about. And not just understanding them and listening, but doing that without judgment. And that's a really big key. And that's a really tough one for a lot of people, is to listen and to be in that objective observation, and to understand and to say, what can I learn from this person? Because a lot of times people go on their spiritual path and they're like, oh, I'm so spiritually evolved and blah, blah, blah. And I'm all past those material things in the world. And yet we forget, that there is always something to learn from that person that's in the material space, for example, or in that other space that we're no longer in, or that we're not walking. And there's always something to learn, even if, I see that when I travel, especially. And that's one of the reasons I like to travel, is because I get to see really what is the common mindsets out there. And I can come down and say, well, it doesn't matter whether I agree with the materialism or not, but this is a present thought pattern that is in our world. This is a current focus of this generation. And if I'm open to learning from that and seeing that that is what is there, and learning what their thoughts are about things, it actually gives me a whole lot more insight into where collective energy is, to learning and showing myself maybe things I've overcome, or maybe things that I'm still dealing with, because people can reflect things that we haven't totally resolved in ourselves. We might think we've resolved them, but maybe we haven't. Um, it can show us where the mindset is of different generations, and that is very important for us to know as well along the way. So doing this, again, this learning and this understanding without judgment, that is the key, because that can help us to come into the objective observation, and that can help us to unfold a wealth of wisdom and a wealth of insights for us to work with, and to help us build and help us know, okay, here's where I need to develop my skills. Because if this is triggering me, if I'm not agreeing with this person, then there's something there that I also am needing to work on, to strengthen, to develop. Because if I was so strong in my spirituality, somebody else's materialism actually wouldn't be an issue for me in there. And I think that that's something to consider. And it's hard because we think, oh my God, I've done so much work. How can I how can I still be triggered by this? Or how can this be happening? And so I think that that's also that important thing. And we don't want to get down on ourselves because of that. We just want to take it and work with it, is all we want to do. And take in, again, those insights. And also, when we understand where somebody else is coming from, it helps us to understand how we need to deal with them. Because if we keep dealing with them in this opposition, then they're not going to be very receptive to anything we have to say. So we have to get out of that opposition in there. Now, this also helps us to stand in unconditional love. And that's a huge thing, as we know. It's a huge thing that's in our codes right now. It's a huge thing that will be in our codes next year as well, coming into that soul self more, getting reconnected with those areas of life of the unconditional love, the divine energy, and to get along even with different views. And that's really the key. It's not about making everybody come to our view or us having to go to their view. It's embracing and understanding and bringing these different views into an area of harmony, or even just into an area, because these different views can help us to see things that maybe we're not seeing, or that we might be missing or not understanding or realizing, just for the mere fact that these views still exist. They still exist in our world. It is an opportunity for us to center into values and spiritual principles, but to also find solutions. So again, coming back into what are things of value, what are the spiritual principles? And if somebody holds a different point of view, really, again, it's not so much that I need to change them, it's about I need to focus on how do I interact with that person through spiritual values, through the spiritual self, and do that not in a way that I place myself above others, because I'm not. Just because I understand something or have worked through something that they haven't, there are inevitably going to be things that they know that I don't. And there is none of this better or worse than. It doesn't make me better than anybody else. I just maybe understand some things that they don't, and vice versa. So we want to stay out of that spiritual arrogance. And I think, you know, I think the person that gave me that term in there, because I love it and I'm using it all the time. I absolutely love it. So it is this opportunity for us to center into values and to center into that, and to find solutions through wisdom. Because if we ignore other people's concerns just because they're different, just because we don't agree with them, then we also are blocking our ability to move forward in wisdom, to move forward in divine essence, to move forward in those spiritual principles. And I think that's important for us to keep in mind, with that, to realize that somewhere in what they're saying, there is a value, there is an importance to be considered in there. And getting that down and really considering, okay, well, what is the core principle here? Not just the area that it's manifesting through or the way it's manifesting, but what is the core principle? So, for example, somebody rooted very heavily in materialism also oftentimes might have control issues, or they might have narcissistic patterns where they're needing a lot of attention. And where does that come from? That's not the core, that's not the end all. Somewhere there are aspects of insecurity residing in there, that that they're not comfortable with their self, that they need approval, that they need verification, validation, or different aspects like that. So when we open this up and we can start to look at really where are the core values, now how do we approach that from a soul self, from wisdom? And that's where it becomes really important. How can I help them find their own sense of value and worth, and to stop being so insecure, and to develop their security without having to take these negative, so-called negative or destructive paths. Um, and there's different ways. Each person's a little bit different. As we get to know the person, again, that open discourse allows us to get to know them more, and then to really open up and have these conversations. Wow, being able to ask the questions of them. Is there something happening there? Because I see where this control comes up over and over again, or I see where this pattern shows up. Is there something connected to that pattern for you? Is there something that's happened for you? that has brought you to have a focus or a need on here. And in that understanding, they may not even be aware of it, but those questions can then start to unfold the answers. And that can be a very powerful process, but it's a very, very touchy situation because a lot of times when people are in those spaces, they don't want to hear things because they feel like it feeds their insecurities even more in there. And we want to do this again, finding these solutions of, okay, how can I help them build their sense of security? How can I help feed the true values, the spiritual qualities in them, instead of, and not enable the destructive patterns in there, and looking at that, and to use that wisdom instead of fear, instead of pressure or urgency, like you need to change this right now, or if you don't change that, your whole life is going to be destroyed. And, as we know, hardships are never pleasant, but sometimes hardships are what it takes for us to learn. And I can look back a lot of times and go, "Oh, that's gonna hurt. That's gonna that's gonna be a hard fall. That's not gonna be a fun one." But I also know that they will learn and they will get past it. And the more I try to put fear and pressure on somebody to change, the more resistant they are going to be to that change. So it's important that I don't do that, and that, I sit back and I go, "Okay, they've got to learn their own lessons, and I need to kind of stay out of the way." But if I can have open discourse with them and we can sit down and have conversations even if we don't agree, I can at least open up my understanding, and then that helps me to better understand how to approach that person or how to interact with them. And sometimes that means I have to let go of the relationship that I desire to have with them in order to just be able to interact with them, and to just be able to come to understand them more, and to again be able to interact with them where they're at and the path that they're on. And this is one of the keys to when we do really evolve, we are able to do that. We don't force everybody into our way. We allow them to be who they are. We meet them where they are. And again, then we have to decide what we're willing to have. But coming back into this aspect of, okay, if I let them be who they are, but I understand better that, these are certain things we can't talk about right now. These are certain things we can talk about. Here's where we can have conversations. And in time, and it takes a lot of patience, and it might take many, many years. It could take decades in some cases, because a lot of us know we don't really get some of these understandings until much later in life. And we have to have the patience to see it through and to keep meeting them where they are, until they come around, and eventually we may get that desired relationship that we've wanted, but we have to be able to let that go and put our love for them first, above that desire for having a particular type of relationship. And this is the divine path in many ways. This is the path that Christ has talked about. This is the path, that many spiritual practices talk about. Is Christ didn't say, "I'm not going to talk to you because you're not on my level." Christ went and talked to everybody. And sometimes that meant just the most basic casual conversations. Sometimes that meant talking about material things. It wasn't always about spiritual talk. It wasn't always about telling people you need to do this or you need to do that. It was just being with them. It was just open discourse, asking them what was important to them, asking them what was valuable, not holding that judgment around that. So I think this is a huge thing, because if we're to get to that desired relationship, we have to be able to let go of having that desired relationship, and to let go of the judgments of where people are at in the meantime. And then we allow ourselves that opportunity. But the more we force that desired relationship or get upset because we don't have it, then the more that we block ourselves from getting it. Now, we really want to be willing to let go of our preconceived notions, and this can be a really hard thing for a lot of people, on the preconceived notions on how that has to be done, how things have to be done, how situations have to manifest, how the relationship has to be, and simply just focus on becoming and living as what we want to create. So if I want to create a spiritual life, I need to be able to be a living example, live as the spiritual principles. And that doesn't mean I'm perfect, because as long as I'm in a human body, I'm not going to do everything perfectly. I'm going to have some mishaps along the way, and I'm going to make some mistakes along the way. And hopefully people will be forgiving of me when I do make those mistakes. And I have to be willing to do the different pieces to allow that. But um, we all have our preconceived notions of what being evolved is, what being spiritual is, what being a good relationship is, what a good partner is. We all have these preconceived notions, and a lot of them have been programmed into us. And so we want to be willing to let go of that as much as possible, and to just to be open to what's being said, to what's coming through, to what is happening in the moment, and to just say, look, I don't have to hold this notion. This is my idea of what it looks like. This is what I would like to experience. So again, instead of saying, well, this makes a good relationship, or that makes a good relationship, or that makes a good connection, or whatever it is, or a good conversation, I need to let go of that and be able to say, well, here's what I would like to have in people, and then can I also handle the other ones that are not like what I'm looking for. And there. And this is where we can start to open up and interact with a wide range of people, as opposed to just a selective group. Because if we say, I'm only going to interact with people who have a certain wisdom or a certain base or a certain mindset, I lock myself off. I block myself to things that are happening in the world. I block myself from really understanding the whole picture and to really seeing what's happening. It's like shutting yourself into an echo chamber. So no matter how evolved we are, or how aligned our perspectives are with divine source, with God's ways, Christ's ways, whatever your path is that you're following, we want to also be able to do this release. And we want to realize that it is important to have a variety of interactions. So this open discourse allows us to hear some of the things that we may not like, or to hear some of the things that we don't want to hear, but they may still be important to hear. And that's the thing to keep in mind, is when we open up, we can expand, we can really see what's happening in things. I have to ask, in many ways, I pose this questions. Well, actually, before I pose that, this aspect of living what we create. If we're living what we create, we will create a strong group of people around us that are also in that mindset. But we will also draw in and show people what else is possible besides their perspective, just as they will show us what else is possible besides our perspective. And we cannot create unity or harmony if we are going to continue to be divided. And this is huge. If we're going to be divided and at war with each other, we cannot create the unity and the harmony. And so we've got to stop battling. And the way to stop battling is to engage in open discourse. It is to embrace the points of view that we don't want to hear. It is to embrace the differences that are out there, and to listen to what has to be said, and then we can come together. Because you look at, everybody gets so polarized, and they get on these opposite sides, and everybody has proof of why their side is correct and show different things, and most sides are not seeing what the other side has. And yes, sometimes one side has more fabricated and lies involved in it, but a lot of times there are some truths there too. And when we're sitting on only our side, we don't see the whole truth of things. And so that open discourse, when we come together and we say, well, this person's doing this, and here's all the proof I have of it, and somebody else says, yeah, but the person you're supporting is doing this, and here's the proof I have to support of it. Now we start to get more of the whole picture in everything. So, again, this open discourse unfolds us to get more of what the whole picture looks like instead of just our perspective of it. So let's, one of the questions I pose in all of this is, what if every view holds something valid? So even if you don't agree with somebody, what if that opposing viewpoint has valid points to it, or has valid pieces of wisdom in it? Why would you reject that? We shouldn't. We want to see all of these valid pieces. What if learning its value helps us to find stronger root cause solutions instead of pacifying dysfunctional patterns? And I think this is really important. If we're not willing to see the value of different viewpoints and ideas and concepts and thoughts in our world, how are we ever going to get to the root cause solutions? How are we ever going to see what the root is in something? We can't. So, yes, of course, we do not want to pacify the dysfunctional patterns. We do not want to enable people in abusive patterns. But we do want to see the value in what they're saying. And that's a huge key as we progress. Now, example of this would be, you have a dictator, an abuser, somebody who's very power-oriented, control-oriented. And the people that are in this space all live in a great amount of pain and torment. We know this. This has been proven over and over again when they get down to the roots and they unfold what's behind things and they say, oh, I've had all this pain, I've been in all this pain, I've been in all of this suffering. And so the abuses really are stemming from that most of the time. And all that they are doing is an attempt to relieve their pain. So even though we see it as, oh, they're just an abuser, oh, they're just this horrible person, oh, they're just a dictator, all of those actions that they take to control and abuse and be a dictator are their way of trying to relieve their pain in there. And it sounds very distorted to some people, but that's really what they're trying to do, because there's something within them that gets a relief from the pain when they do that. But it's very similar to an addiction or a drug or a sugar rush even, or a caffeine fix, or a smoke break, or any of those things, where you get that temporary pleasure, but then it eats on you more when you go through it. So as we start to learn this, it gives us a wider perspective in things and a stronger idea on how to handle the things that are present. And we may also realize that having authority over others only perpetuates their pain, or is a superficial band-aid. So we understand that, a lot of these people that have these issues, that live in this pain and this torment, will rise into these positions of power or authority, or be a boss in a company, or a CEO in a company, or different things like that. And they'll have authority over other people. But when they're put in these positions, it's only perpetuating their pain, and it's not helping their pain. It's not helping them to resolve anything or to deal with anything. It's allowing them to escape, kind of put that Band-Aid fix on things, and not face what's really happening there for them. So it becomes a very superficial fix. Now, if we are loving truly, unconditionally, we would remove this person from a position of power. We would stop turning our power over to them. We would stop agreeing with them, and we would stop doing the things that enable them. We would remove them from their ability to have power and influence. And that is unconditional love in so many ways, because we don't want to be coddling them in their pain, which requires great pain to be inflicted on others. So, if we're coddling them going, oh, well, it's just they're in so much pain, we need to let them do what they they have to do, this is not helping anything. It's just creating more pain for many other people in there. And then we actually are subliminally or passive aggressively supporting the abuses that are going on in ways we're now taking on that abusive behavior. So, we actually, I'm all for people getting the help that they need to get. Don't get me wrong. I do want to see people who need help get help in things. If they have issues and they need to face these things, I want them to have the help. But they're not going to be helped by remaining in these positions. We need to find healthy ways for them to feel more self-assured, more know their worth and know their value in non-destructive ways. And we need to give them that space. They're not in a safe space when they're put on these positions. Matter of fact, it creates more insecurities for them in these positions of power because everybody's watching them, everybody's judging them, everybody's got these things. They have more pressure on them. We actually need to remove them from those spheres, give them that so-called safe space to be in where they can start to deal with everything and start to find the healthy aspects that are in there. If you have somebody that's an alcoholic, you're not going to solve the alcoholic issue by having them manage a bar. It's just not going to happen. So it's the same similar concept in there. And so if we truly have that love, we're going to remove them from those positions. Now, once they're removed from power, steps can then be taken to deal with the root cause of the pain. And then they can start to experience what it's like to truly have the pain relieved and eased. And so, see, the common goal is about easing the pain. Even though we're in this opposition with them, the common goal is still to ease the pain. And I think that's the thing that we want to keep in mind. So the key focus is to ease the pain. The awareness is to realize that the pain cannot be eased through allowing abuses. And the need is a safe space to heal in. And that safe space is not a position of power. A position of power is not a safe space for them to be in. And that safe space to heal in, the space that they need to address things, that needs to be free from giving or receiving abuse. Because again, a lot of the pain that abusers have or dictators have or things like that, that they are enforcing onto other people and being abusive to other people comes because oftentimes they were abused. And that's what they know and that's what they understand. And that's the way they've learned to interact with people in the world. So they need to be free from that giving or receiving abuse, as both positions will lock in pain and both positions lock in dysfunction for them. So that space really has to come around and do that. So it's really about releasing the earthly programs and remembering divine wholeness. And that's what it comes down to. So this open discourse, what does it do? It makes us face the things that we don't always want to hear. And through that, we can actually get down to releasing the programs and releasing the lies and releasing the different aspects and come into that divine wholeness and into that unconditional love space. So I hope this has been valuable. I hope it's been helpful. I've definitely gone way longer than I anticipated going with this, but feel free to drop some comments in, the chat here. Give it a like, share it out if it's been useful for you, and definitely jump over to compassioncodes.com and check out the work that I'm doing and pick up your copy of the 2024 book, The Code Journey. Take care, everybody.